the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Jim Zuffoletti. Jim is a Darden alum. He graduated in the Full-Time MBA Class of 2005, and he also serves as the Entrepreneurship Community Director for the Batten Institute, as well as adjunct instructor for the Venture Velocity course here at the Darden School of Business. I recently connected with Jim to talk about his background, what led him to Darden, why he's so passionate about entrepreneurship, how the Venture Velocity class works, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here's my interview with Jim Zuffoletti. Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here, Brett. Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you here. How's everything going? How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I mean, it's here we are in the fall of 2023, amidst the AI revolution and everything that's going on there. And from my personal perspective as a deep believer in entrepreneurship, I'm excited because a lot of interest in AI means a lot of interest in entrepreneurship and startups, and you're starting to see that taking place here associated with Darden. So good time, great fall. Excited for the year to start.
All right. Well, we so appreciate your taking time out of your schedule to come on the podcast to talk a little bit more about your background and what you do here at Darden and UVA generally. So tell us a little bit more about you. Who are you and what's your story?
Absolutely. So I am, I guess, for the purposes of the discussion today, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been involved in starting companies pretty much continuously for the last 30 years. So I was a economics major undergraduate. Really thought that I was headed towards a kind of a corporate experience. Took a job as a financial analyst in the early 1990s, working for General Electric, which was a really interesting time. This was the Welch era. And I know there's a lot of people who have all different opinions about Welch, but it was great working there. I was actually at corporate headquarters for a good portion of my time. And I thought I was on my way to a corporate career. And I was on a rotational program, second rotation through. I got involved in the startup of entrepreneurship, a startup of a new product within a lending business there at what was once called GE Capital. And I got to the end of the period, and you have to get reviewed by your boss. And I got the top review rating that was possible. So I got an A or an HB, I think, as we would call it here at Darden now. And boss in the review said, listen, you as a financial analyst will never be better than about half good. You're an average financial analyst. And I gave you the top rating because of the work that you did as an entrepreneur for this program and the startup of this venture within GE Capital. And so, frankly, the light bulb went off. Well, kind of two light bulbs. The first one is, I'm in this financial program and I'm never going to be better than average, but also, hey, there's this thing called entrepreneurship that I'd never really thought about. And maybe I should give it a go. And as it happened, got involved in another entrepreneurship initiative later on during my rotational period. And before I graduated from that training program, I left early to get involved in an internet startup that was related to that second entrepreneurship entity, which I was working on from 1994, 95, all the way through 2003. So, I've been an entrepreneur. I was a junior member of the founding team through that startup, and then have been engaged in startups post Darden as well over the last 20 years. And then during that period, my wife and I have raised our 4 kids, who are now, my youngest is now a first year at UVA. So all things come back as a circle, if you will.
Was it surprising to get that feedback that you had a particular facility, a skill with these kind of entrepreneurial activities?
Honestly, it was. I mean, I really, I've often talked when I come back, I'm very close to Professor Sarah Sarasvathy, who's an incredible scholar of entrepreneurship here at Darden. And when I come back to her class, one of the things I always like to talk about is the fact that, I was not a kid with a lemonade stand or any of those kind of early commerce things growing up. And so my expectations were that I was going to be one of those corporate people. I was the son of a corporate person. I was a corporate brat growing up, meaning I moved up and down the East Coast. And so this was just the thing. And so it was truly an eye opener. And I credit, frankly, the time period as well, because conceiving of yourself in the dawn of the internet as an entrepreneur really was possible. I mean, too many people, frankly, really viewed themselves as being entrepreneurs. And so it was the environment made it happen, and I joined on board, but I had no idea up front.
So in the midst of all this, how did you decide that you wanted to pursue an MBA?
So the story starts with, I got involved with this startup in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, after I worked at GE, called Free Markets. And Free Markets was this like stereotypical internet moonshot. Went public in December of 1999, so kind of the most exciting moment. It was a decacorn IPO. And then for the next several years, I had a bunch of positions, including I was general manager for the largest business unit for several years. But I was always a junior member of the founding team. There were 4 of us when we founded the company in 95. There were 3 more senior people, meaning they were 5 years older than me, but they were much more kind of senior in terms of their experience to me, the young 25-year-old. And I really felt like that what I wanted to do after that run was start another business. And so I was looking for kind of the launch pad associated with that, living in Pittsburgh, and decided that getting an MBA was the important next step. I had found myself as a general manager. I found myself exposed to fundraising, but in many of these areas, I really felt like I had to learn on the job. And so I felt like it was a need that I had to get skill areas around general management and fundraising and entrepreneurship. And then I started looking at schools where it was available. And, there was an incubator here at Darden. There were people who were committed to entrepreneurship here at Darden. And so, and then, importantly, as another consideration, as a parent with young children, I also was looking for a livable place, and Darden really checked the boxes. I applied to a couple of schools. As soon as I got into Darden, I withdrew all those applications, and this is where I wanted to be, and frankly, this is where I've stayed since I've graduated as well.
So how did you continue to pursue entrepreneurship while you were a Darden student?
Yeah, so part of, to continue the story, I show up at Darden. I know I want to be a founder. But ironically, I have no idea what the business I'm going to start is. And to give you a sense of, in a way, how kind of pathetic my search was, I even thought about things like, I'm a software person, but I even thought about things like nanomaterials and things like that. And I was really, really fortunate, which is, when you show up at Darden, they've got the affinity groups, they've got professional groupings that they do with you. And so I had an opportunity to get exposed to a bunch of other people who were here at Darden to be entrepreneurs or intended to be entrepreneurs. And one of those people ended up being a co-founder with me of a business based on my co-founder. His name is Ottavio Freri, his idea. And so the two of us founded a business. Literally during the first year we were here, we participated in the business plan competition. We were in the incubator, and we stayed in the incubator, frankly, after we graduated until the moment we had to move out. And then, really set up shop with the business here in Charlottesville. And over a succession of 3 different businesses that we started, over the last 20 years, have continued to stay as a Charlottesville-based business. But the genesis was while doing cases during first year, balancing that with building a business plan, going to see potential customers, trying to build software, all of those things that are kind of quintessential to the entrepreneurial experience.
Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the businesses that you and Ottavio launched together?
Absolutely. So we had our first business was called OpenQ, and OpenQ was focused around a software solution that's kind of a variant of CRM, focused for the life sciences industry. So think pharmaceutical companies and medical device companies. And we were a huge beneficiary of being part of the Darden ecosystem and alumni network. Through our work, we found customers, we found advisors, we found people who were critical to the development of the business. And frankly, we were never afraid to ask. That was one of our big things is we were shameless. We would crash, if some medical device company had an executive that was showing up and making a presentation, we would crash, whatever class or presentation was there so that we could be associated with it. So that was OpenQ. Then I got involved. The two of us started to see an opportunity in the emergence of social business and built a company called Social Safeguard, which was a compliance-oriented product that we had out in the market. And then the third business was a cybersecurity company originally named Safeguard Cyber. And again, there, the idea was all of the communications that are beyond email that people are using, like Zoom that we're using right now, are the new communication channels for businesses, both within the enterprise and without. And they are all vulnerable pipes, if you will, for data to be stolen and things like that. And that's what we built the business at Safeguard Cyber around.
Well, one of the things that's happening for you this fall is that you're leading the Venture Velocity class. How did you get involved with this opportunity? What brought you back to Darden in this role?
Yeah, there were a couple of things, both happy and sad, associated with it that brought me back here. The happy one is I was very fortunate to be among the members of the very first class that Professor Sarasvathy taught when she first arrived here in the fall of 2004. And I had studied effectuation as part of our first year curriculum. We read a short piece that she put out that I would highly recommend to anybody thinking about entrepreneurship called What Makes Entrepreneurs Entrepreneurial. And through the years, after I graduated, I stayed in touch. And so as soon as I finished at the beginning of 2022, being involved in these different startups, I was back in touch with Professor Sarasvathy, looking for ways to be engaged with Darden and with entrepreneurship at Darden. And so I started jumping into her class, getting to meet many of the students. And then the sad part was, quite frankly, within the Darden community, an incredible tragedy happened, which is the instructor for Venture Velocity, Damon DeVito, very, very suddenly passed away and left an incredible gap within the community as both the leader of this Venture Velocity class, but also as a person who was such an important community builder for entrepreneurship across Darden, across grounds, and quite frankly, for anybody he interacted with. And so I was involved with Saras. I started getting involved with some of the graduates of that class, and that begat the opportunity to take responsibility for the Venture Velocity class, which has just been an incredible opportunity because it very much continues on in the tradition of what Professor Sarasvathy teaches in starting new ventures. It's very much the capstone of the entrepreneurial experience, and it's really, really designed for the person who thinks, I don't know if this is the full-time job I have after graduation, but I really, really want to make a go at starting a business. And there's a great track record through the years, including Roback, the apparel company, of individuals who have taken this class and launched businesses out of it. And so, my responsibility is to help continue to foster those entrepreneurs, to teach them to the best that I can, to expose them to effectuation, and to give them the tools that they can do to launch their own businesses, just as I had the chance, 20 years ago.
Appreciate your kind words about Damon DeVito. I can tell you every student founder who ever came on this podcast to talk about their idea and their development of their idea mentioned Damon. He had a significant impact on the community here at Darden, and so many people beyond just the founders. I want to talk a little bit more about effectuation, because this does come up in these conversations and some of our listeners might not know exactly what it is. So how do you explain it to people who don't know much about effectuation?
Yeah, I mean, the starting point is for people who are especially showing up at Darden, who are engaged in graduate studies, is effectuation is this logic around how expert entrepreneurs have been proven to act as they develop their own businesses. And it's the rigor of the discovery that's really compelling for me as I looked at what effectuation was about as a topic and then the research behind it. So the starting point is, this is not a theory of entrepreneurship that's based on one person's previous experience. This is a study of expert entrepreneurship and how they behave and how they make decisions, and what that translates into in terms of a series of practices that can be learned, importantly, by everyone. So that's kind of the backdrop. But the best way that, if you had to really quickly describe effectuation to people, is there's this common conception of entrepreneurship, which is it's about people who have this incredible vision about this incredible return they're going to get, and they're single-mindedly going after that goal. And the reality is that effectuation, from the research, tells us that the best entrepreneurs are out there. And think people like the founders of Apple are people who actually start with an inventory of what means they have available to them, an approach to investing only those means, and a predisposition towards partnership and engagement with other people. So effectuation is a way to build businesses that is proven by experts, that can be learned by anyone who comes to Darden, but frankly can be learned by everyone. It's 5 principles. They're really straightforward. And a person who learns those principles can really immediately get into the action of starting a business. So that's how I think about effectuation in terms of both the rigor behind it, but also its applicability in any kind of startup, whether we're talking about for-profit or social enterprise, doesn't matter. Effectuation is this powerful toolkit that came from Darden, that's taught by Professor Sarasvathy and others like me, and can really help launch entrepreneurs on their successful careers.
You mentioned that venture velocity in many ways represents kind of the capstone experience for students who have an entrepreneurial interest during their time here at Darden. And so I'm curious, how do you structure the class? How do you think about what students will do during their time with you?
Yeah, so there are a couple of really critical elements as I created the curriculum. So I love the term velocity, because it really demonstrates that commitment towards kind of leaning forward into things and moving as quickly as possible. And so each class topic has velocity in the title, whether we're talking about sales velocity or marketing philosophy, or the role of the founder as the chief executive of the organization, and executive velocity. So we focus on topics from week to week. We try to make every single assignment within the class focused on things that are directly contributing to the business itself. So a person, I've said to the members of the class, If I give you an assignment and you cannot reuse it in the business, I want to know so that we will not repeat that assignment ever again, because it has to be about what contributes directly to their business. And the last component about it, and this is very much about what goes on at Darden, whether you're in learning teams or you're in your section, is this sense of collaboration. So the magic of venture velocity, if I can use that word without it sounding too presumptuous, is about having the individual entrepreneurs with all of the individual expertise they bring to the table. Maybe they're not experienced entrepreneurs, but they're experienced individuals and what they contribute to one another. And that's just amazing. When I have classes, when the entrepreneurs are discussing back and forth, and I am just the facilitator, it's like the best of the teaching when you're operating with the case method, where everybody is learning from one another and they're getting better, and you're just along for the ride to kind of help shape and set things up. So that's how we have the course set up. It culminates in a demo day of sorts. The demo day can literally end up in interactions that might lead to funding or the launch of the business and the like.
It's interesting sort of to think about how entrepreneurship is perceived in our society. I think we tend to think about unicorn companies and billion-dollar valuations and all this kind of stuff, which can feel very intimidating to students who are thinking about this path. How do you help people think through what entrepreneurship is or can be?
Yeah, well, the first thing you do is you start with correcting that conception, which is, if you think about those unicorn companies and venture-backed companies, and by the way, I've been in this world, they represent such a small portion of the companies that are created. The percentage of companies from the data, this is put out by Professor Sarasvathy, that receive venture money in any given year is about 0.1% or 0.01% rather of all companies that are founded during an individual year. So 99% plus of those companies, they get their money from other places that are not venture capital, and they grow businesses that, quite frankly, are just as successful and enduring over time as the businesses that get all the attention because they get the venture capital and sometimes they get the splashy IPO. And so the starting point is you really show that the vast majority of the startups are really not oriented towards that. The startups are oriented towards people who, to go back to the principles of effectuation, they start with their means, they start with what they've got, and they start making things happen so that they can immediately start thinking about, how am I serving the customer? How can the customer help me shape that vision? And so it's about dispelling the myth and then impelling the action. One of my favorite things that I learned that Damon was frequented to say to the members of the class is, the best day to plant a tree is yesterday, and the second best day to plant a tree is today. And I don't know if he originated that or it came from somebody else, but the fact of the matter is, action is what you can drive people towards. And as long as they have their own drive, you really have to want to be an entrepreneur as well. But those are really the elements, which is you convey that they have the tools and the means to get underway immediately, and you let them know that what they've been told by society, what entrepreneurship means, is just not proven out in terms of the actual data that's out there.
How do you encourage students to think, or maybe in conversation with prospective students, people who are just learning about Darden, about the entrepreneurial ecosystem, the resources and support that are available here at the school?
Yeah, well, the first piece is there were so many facets to it. I have to give credit to the Batten Institute for how much they foster entrepreneurship in all different elements, from scholarship to teaching to seminars, and so there's a whole facet of programs that come through because of Batten. I think that the coursework that you can take, whether it's starting new ventures, you can take ETA, you can take venture velocity, you can even take a first year elective around entrepreneurship, really gives kind of a rich program in terms of coursework. And then there's the incubator, the iLab, and which gives you that opportunity to work on your business over the summer in a really intensive way. And then the last piece, frankly, is all the competitions, concept competition and the like. That all of that fits within this culture again of collaboration and support. It's a rigorous place, but it's a collaborative place. And so, as you think about the stories of new businesses, they're not solo sports, they're team sports. And many of the new members of your team, whether they're full-time or part-time or contributors or advisors, they come from within the Darden community. So there's just many, many different aspects that can really meet people from, those who might show up here with their own startup underway to people who are just starting with an idea, and how did they work through that ideation and perfection, whether it's involved in effectuation or design thinking, which is another series of classes that you can take to help your entrepreneurship here as well with Professor Lidka.
What's interesting to hear you mention ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition. I know that this has also been something that's been growing in interest amongst Darden students in full-time as well as executive MBA and part-time too. Do you ever have students talk to you about ETA?
Absolutely. Just in the last class on Monday. And in fact, the position that I've taken with Venture Velocity is if you are in Venture Velocity and your venture is a search fund, that's fair game. It's certainly true that there are different flavors of entrepreneurship that people can engage in. And it is a flavor of entrepreneurship. One of the things that's exciting about it, frankly, if you're a Darden student and you get this incredible unmatched curriculum around general management and you want to be an entrepreneur, you've got this great opportunity to bring them together in ETA in a way that if you're going 0 to 1 is going to be a different experience. And so I think it's a really interesting trend. It plays so well to the expertise that's been developed over the last half a century, frankly, at Darden around general management. And I love it as part of kind of the overall portfolio of experience, both within the entrepreneurial community as well as in my own class.
Some of our listeners may not be familiar with what a search fund is. Do you want to explain
Oh,
what that
sure.
is?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. So if you are engaged in entrepreneurship through acquisition, you may get into entrepreneurship through acquisition by working with an existing organization that's already going out and buying a business. But you might also decide that the fund, you're not going to join another fund, if you will. You're going to create your own fund and get backers who will back your search and then back your acquisition process of the business. And so it's and in fairness, ETA has different elements to it, and search funds are part of it. So if you want to get into ETA, many paths, and one of them is starting a search fund. And several people coming out of Darden have done that quite successfully.
I want to go back to your story a little bit. You mentioned coming to Darden, you wanted to do a venture, you had this on your mind. Did you have a plan B, or was it always going to be entrepreneurship?
I did not have a plan B. In all honesty, Brett, I showed up at Darden, and from day one, even in my admissions interview, I recall, and my admissions person is still here, the admissions person who I interviewed with, I made it very clear I was here at Darden to learn and to launch my next business. And when I had the career counseling sessions, I made it clear that I was not looking to do anything else other than entrepreneurship, and everybody respected me. There's a lot of people who do management consulting. There's a lot of people who do investment banking. There are even people who do those and still think about entrepreneurship as well. Several out of Venture Velocity last year are consultants now with businesses that they're operating as an entrepreneur on the side. That was never my focus. I really felt like what I wanted to dedicate myself to while I was here at Darden was my studies, the startup of a new business, and my family.
How did you and Tavio connect? How did you find each other?
Yeah, it was literally, there were maybe our year, maybe there were 20 to 30. So let's say 5 to 10% of the class overall, who were people who identified as being interested in entrepreneurship. So whenever they had these events for people who were interested in entrepreneurship, they'd invite all of us and we'd all show up. And so we kept on seeing each other the events again and again and again. And so I don't know if it was the second or third or fourth event, when Ottavio and I are both at the event together, but we end up we end up talking, and he had already conceived of an idea, and we just ran with that through the starting of the business that became OpenQ. So it was the Darden structures, if you will, that really brought us together, and it was the incubator that fostered us. And often in Professor Sarasvathi's class, when I come back to guest lecture, I talk about the fact that our most successful early contract came while we were still in the incubator, and we had to support a site visit. So I guess we hadn't closed the contract, but the contract emerged as a possibility. And so we had to move out of Darden finally and into a local office and create a business, a physical presence. But until then, Darden had been our home. So it was all of that that brought us together.
I'm always interested to hear where people's ideas come from. You mentioned this first idea was one that he had in mind. What about the second and the third thing? Where did those come from?
Yeah, so both of them have kind of a little bit less colorful but interesting stories. So in we were running OpenQ at the time. We had raised some venture money. I'll spare you the details, but we had run into some significant headwinds in terms of the dynamics associated with our market space. And we were very fortunate to connect with some people at Salesforce, the company out in San Francisco. And we were on a call with them one day talking a little bit about our app. And offhandedly, one of the product people said, it would be really good if there was a company that made a product that helped people use our social business product, but do it in a compliant way. And we said, oh, we'll do that. And so that conversation based on that identified need that product person at Salesforce had, who is still a person we're in contact with to this day, begat the creation of a whole new business. And that became Social Safeguard. And true to form, Salesforce was an early partner for us in terms of helping identify potential customers, major customers in the financial services industry and the like. And one of the things that we recognized as we were kind of ensuring compliance for all these different social business platforms was we were in the message flow. And we quickly realized that once you're in the message flow, it's not just about compliance, it's also about cybersecurity. And so this is where we're fast forwarding to the original conflict between Ukraine and Russia that was taking place in 2014, 2015, that included a lot of social media warfare. And so we looked at kind of the warfare that was taking place in Ukraine at the time, and we said, this is going to come to the States. Cybersecurity is going to emerge as a trend within all these social business platforms like Facebook and Slack, and we've got to protect those platforms. And so we created Safeguard Cyber as an opportunity to take the existing access that we had with Social Safeguard and have it become a cybersecurity company.
Very interesting to hear where these ideas come from. I wonder, what is it about entrepreneurship in particular that has sparked for you, that's led you down this path? What do you enjoy about it?
Well, I'd say personally, I love the experience of going from 0 to 1, to use the expression for Peter Thiel, who, I think his book is a phenomenal book about entrepreneurship. and several of the videos that are available online about him. Professor Sarasvathy uses another interesting turn of phrase, which is 0 to 60, meaning 0 to 60 miles per hour when you're starting the business. And so I love that challenge of going about and creating something that then you're able to ultimately craft in conjunction with the customer that you can ultimately sell to the customer. And that's why effectuation is so appealing to me, because in many ways I felt like it gave me a vocabulary to understand the way that I was being an entrepreneur, which is, start with what you have, bias for action, work with the customer to help the customer, and partners, which will help you define what your offering is overall. And so, that drew me to the world of entrepreneurship. And then to circle back to effectuation, I share the desire or the belief that Professor Sarasvathy has, which is entrepreneurship has been thought of so long as this field that's based on, I did it this way, so you should do it this way, and almost like a self-help view. And in truth, it is a new field of endeavor with learnable principles and learnable rules. And I have stayed involved because I've continued to be attracted to that, where, I think about my affordable loss, which is another principle of effectuation, on a regular basis. And so I've got this vocabulary that I can use that seems very natural to me. So those are the things that really attracted me to the act of entrepreneurship, that ability to do something versus just spending time thinking or doing something that somebody else was telling you needed to do.
Yeah, I appreciate the effectuation framework because I think it also counters that idea that like an entrepreneur is like this singular person, this genius idea, this kind of just an outlier of sorts. Like this is something that you can learn, you can do, you can actually implement. Like you don't have to be that kind of person that I think sometimes popularly we associate with entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. No, and I don't want to take us too far afield, but if you even go into the past of Steve Jobs, who's probably like the prototypical, oh, he had a vision, and you actually look at how Steve Jobs started Apple with Steve Wozniak, it was full of what you would recognize as effectuation. In fact, there's this wonderful video that I think it's the Santa Clara Historical Society has. That's a relatively late in life interview with Steve Jobs. And one of the things he talks about is kind of the critical element of asking and really going to other people for counsel, for collaboration, for partnership. And it really flies in the face of this idea of an entrepreneur has to have this singular vision and hold on to that vision no matter what. And even Steve Jobs was really about talking to people, asking them for things along the way as he and Wozniak were building the business. So it's out there in terms of what the data is in just a tremendous way.
Well, Jim, last question for you here. Is there a piece of advice that you would share with our prospective student listeners, something that you would encourage them to think about as they go forth on their own MBA journeys?
Absolutely. So beyond, I'll say stating the obvious, if you are a prospective student as a listener to this podcast and you are thinking about entrepreneurship, I can very much tell you passionately, you have a home here at Darden. There is an ecosystem that you can plug into, and in many ways, versus and this is one of those things one tries to be conscientious of. It is an entrepreneurship culture that focuses on helping develop the student as an entrepreneur, as opposed to an employee at an early stage company. And so that's something that you can find here. The second piece of advice that I would tell people is, in the spirit of effectuation, it is come to Darden and know that as soon as you land here, you can get involved in starting your business. There's nothing that says you have to wait till you graduate, till you're a second year, or anything about that. It is the experience of being at Darden is very rigorous. It's very intense. But you can be an entrepreneur at the same time, and in many ways they will reinforce one another. It's something that I did. It's something that my co-founder got involved in. I've seen many students through the years, again, to go back to the rowback example, of people who were first years who really were able to do that. So come here and start, because there will never be a better time. And you will never have as much that you'll be able to plug into in such a short period of time.
Well, Jim, it's been so much fun talking with you, hearing your story, talking about venture velocity and your advice for students who are considering an entrepreneurial path. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It's been a pleasure, Brett, but so much appreciated. Love entrepreneurship and love talking about it, sometimes too much.
And that was an interview with Jim Zuffoletti, Entrepreneurship Community Director for the Batten Institute and adjunct instructor for the Venture Velocity course here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.